In this episode of Arts and Offers, we're going to be talking about 5 takeaways from the poetry conference that we just led, including talking about why we needed to organize a poetry conference. I can find a place to deliver my poem, but I don't necessarily have a lot of spaces where I can develop my poem. That was one area of the conference that I wanted to address. This also included some things that we needed from the facilitators. What are some of the reasons why they would want to be part of this? So it's like, this is a chance for you to create a workshop that potentially you could run multiple times, that you may not already have right now. So, you're creating an asset for yourself. And then in addition to that, just with the access to the equipment I have, is say, hey, we'll record you. And lastly, we're going to talk about some things to consider moving forward if you want to organize your own poetry conference in the future. So we just hosted our very first, and honestly, I believe it's Columbus's very first poetry conference. Columbus has had writing conferences before. It has writing festivals in which poetry takes a part. But it hasn't really had a dedicated, to my knowledge, conference just for poetry itself. And so we ran our first one, and so I want to talk about just kind of 5 takeaways from running it and share them with you. So maybe you can think about not necessarily organizing your own conference, although that'd be cool if you did, but maybe something of a larger scale on your own, what to expect, things that'll be helpful, things to avoid, and just some general takeaways to move for your own art. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, guys. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to Arts and Offers. This is your video podcast that is focused on that intersection between poetry, art, and business to guide you in this process. There is me. Hello, my name is Geoff.
I'm Matthias.
How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Just staying busy. I feel like, coming off of this weekend, I think one of the things that I was like really excited about was just like, kind of watching all of the presenters and the people that were involved kind of talk about, poetry and like kind of talk about their experiences kind of leaving out of that place. And so it was really invigorating. It was really, really cool, man. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah. It was a long day. It was tiring. I didn't really have to necessarily even do a lot. I was managing like the cameras and just making sure everything's were getting sorted. So we had 2 different spaces. We had this space, the stands, and then we rented a space 2 doors down to do some concurrent sessions, because that's in organizing the conference, I feel like that's a key component of a conference where there's multiple sessions happening at once, and having that ability to decide, like, if you're not interested in the main talk or whatever, there's another option.
Yeah.
So that was really key. I wanted to make sure that there were, if not for the full time, so it was only for about like a 3-hour portion of the 5-7 hour day, at least about a half of that time, people had different things they could do. And it also allowed me to bring in more facilitators and things like that to talk about things that maybe wouldn't have fit into our main talk. So our main talk on this stage was about more craft-related things and theory and things like that, whereas the sessions that were concurrent were more about the actual writing, like, hey, you leave with poems or drafts of poems and things like that. So I'm glad we had that.
Yeah, I thought it was cool because it was like, which is a good problem to have. Maybe to a degree, maybe you could speak a little bit more on that. But like, whenever people would come for their sessions, it's like there might be multiple sessions that they're going to, right? And so because there's multiple sessions that they're going to, but maybe they're not all grouped in together. So maybe they got a session right now, but then the next session that you wanted to sign up for is in like 30 minutes. It allowed a space for them to, they don't have to necessarily go somewhere else or anything like that.
Right.
They can kind of go right down the street, and they can also be participating in some writing, which is really cool. And it was also a little bit more of I would say it was more relaxed space in the sense that it was like, because it's not as formalized, you know what I mean, as the straight up like the talks are. You kind of had a space where people, you could participate in the activity that's going on in that space. Ty actually brought in materials, and he taught how to do some like zine stuff, which was like really cool. I'm trying my hardest to not make it my new obsession in my life, but it might get there.
Yeah. We're
But
entering Matthias's collage era, and collage and zines. There is a huge parallel
it's like
between them.
all the answers are right there. I was like making like little poems on my collages for my for my exhibit at UAS for the Alternative United Country, and then I was just like, I could just integrate poems in this. And so when Ty is like he's like showing me how to do like the folds, and I'm just like, oh, this is the key. I found it. So, but yeah, no, it was really cool to be able to kind of do the activities from the other facilitators in that space as well. But yeah, ultimately, I think like having kind of that dual space kind of also is like a little bit of a release valve too. So it's like, if you spend like 2 or 3 sessions in a row, kind of here, maybe you go over there to kind of, okay, let me kind of take in, like kind of relax a little bit, maybe do some free writing or anything like that, and then come right back over here for another session.
That's important. Having that change of setting and movement, even just like sitting in a different spot of a room, has a big impact. That's something that, if we had sessions with the same participants, trying to get people to, when a new session starts, changing your position, things like that, because it puts you in a new state. There's I think I've referenced this before. There's a concept called like state dependent learning. It's the idea that, like, for instance, like if you learn something when you're drunk and then you get sober, the chance that you remember it go down. But then when you get drunk again, you actually have a higher chance of remembering it because the state you learned it in, you were drunk.
That's actually, I feel like there's like a science fiction like edge to that, to where it's like when you're drunk, you like enter into like another dimensional space, and like that dimensional space knows all of the things. Have you seen, man, that why can't I don't even know why I can't think of the show, but it's on like Apple TV, and it's about like the work life separation. I don't know why I can't think of. I'm gonna like think of it randomly throughout the course of this. Yeah. Hold on, I'm just gonna, because this is actually gonna. Oh, I turned my phone off. So there's that.
You're very you're a good host. But
yeah, but it's all y'all. I like at some point I'm gonna watch this on YouTube, and I'm just gonna put it in the comment section. But it's essentially a show where it's like when they go to work, they actually become a completely different version of themselves.
Well, don't we already do that?
Think about it. But yeah, but it's essentially that. It's just like you there's like a chip that goes in your brain that like when you it's like they go up this elevator, and as soon as they reach this floor in the elevator, they become a completely like different kind of new being.
Oh, but man. Elon Musk is listening in and be like, yes.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he's watched the show.
He produced it. He made it.
Like the thing that's putting him onto this like multiple Academy Award winning show that's produced by Apple TV is like diverse. He's like, wait a minute, this snuck right under my nose.
Yeah, but it's the same kind of idea. Yeah.
Yeah, which is also it's interesting. I don't recommend that as a technique, anybody that's like trying to memorize something, but
no, but I think like if you lead a workshop, like I think this is like the very first thing. Like if you're leading a workshop, like assessing the space and adapting the space to your needs instead of just sticking with what the space is already like, is really key, because that's going to dictate the entire experience. So it's like if you're like, I want groups, I don't care how else is going to work. Like we had one workshop leader who originally had planned for stations, but our room wasn't set up for stations. But she, and I get there's time constraints and things like that. But if I had been leading that workshop, I would have been like, no, I'm reorganizing this room to do stations, because that's what that's what we need. Because this isn't conducive, and it's worth taking the time to do that. I might lose a little bit of instructional time, but for the experience I have in mind, that's what I need to do. As much as it's not always possible to do that, but it does change how people interact and how people experience what it is that you're going to teach. But the reason I brought up again, like kind of like state dependent learning, is that this also works in like classrooms and things like that. Like if you always sit in the same seat then on test day, you want to sit in that same seat. You don't want to move to a different seat because that's a different state. And I think that in workshops, the nice thing about workshops is each new workshop is a chance to refresh because it's
Yeah.
kind of like it's also like when you work out like if you always work out at the same time at the same place, the workout it's hard for that workout to be as rigorous as day 1 if you're on day 1,000 because your body's
Yeah.
already in oh, I'm in this place. I'm already prepared. So like your body already kind of gets like the defenses going. Whereas if you worked out even at a different gym,
Yeah.
the workout would be a lot harder,
Yeah.
Or if you worked out at a different gym at like 8 o'clock instead of at noon, your workout actually, even if you did the same exercises, they would actually be a little bit harder because
Yeah.
you're shaking things up. Um, so all that to say, I like that the workshops gave opportunities to shake things up on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and I think that I mean the and shout out. Let's clap it up. Shout out to the all of the instructors too, because I think
Yes.
that like kind of seeing them kind of come in and have an idea about like what they wanted to present. It was clear like they all did their research, and they were like during their practicing. It would be cool to like I don't know, maybe like talk to them even like at some point.
Mm,
But like kind of what their practice was as far as like how they kind of got ready. Because I think that a lot of times it's hard to like public speaking is not like easy necessarily,
right.
right? And there's one thing to do it as just like a poet where you're just getting up there and you're saying your poem, and the most kind of reaction that you're really necessarily getting is claps or snaps or rewinds or anything like that. But it's coming from out there. But when you are leading kind of like a class or you're leading this discourse, it's like you're presenting information, sure, but then you're also really dependent on feedback and how people are responding and things like that. So yeah, it was just really cool to see a lot of these poets kind of step out of their shell in that way, and really being able to apply themselves to like kind of getting that feedback and being able to put information out there that you know objective or subjective, it was part of their process, and it's like how they create poems. And so it was really good to see.
Yeah. So I kind of want to just talk about 5 aspects of the conference that kind of just like thinking to myself, but again, also think about things that may be relevant for you if you're watching this. And that I think kind of leads into the very first one. So like, why even do a conference at all? And like I mentioned earlier, like Columbus has lots of opportunities to showcase poetry. There's shows. There's not as many open mics as there used to be, but there are still open mics. And I think one of the things you see is that if I'm thinking poetry in the city, I can find a place to deliver my poem, but I don't necessarily have a lot of spaces where I can develop my poem. And
Mm.
so that was one area of the conference that I wanted to address. Additionally, I feel like again poetry kind of gets I think it's kind of kicked to the side in favor of other art forms and even just writing in general. Like
Yeah.
again, we have an arts festival where poetry has a space, but the space is literally called like Word is Art. It's a very defensive name, right? It's like basically
Yeah.
say, hey guys, we're art too. Like it's very like don't forget about us. So
Yeah.
it's one that kind of puts us in a submissive role, and I think we want to instead take one that's a little bit more active in saying like, no, we don't have to prove anything. Like we are here.
Yeah. You see, I think we as like artists in the community, like you kind of like separate like a lot of different art forms like that. Or I think that the most clearly, almost objectively viewed version of art is I'm gonna say painting, right? I think like whenever somebody like for the common person when they're thinking of an
Yeah,
artist,
if you say artist, you're thinking painter.
they're thinking of a
Yeah.
painter. And actually, it was interesting. We were in a kind of a conversation, at like kind of a King Samuel. He's a poet. He's a poet, rapper. He also does painting and things like that. He does kind of a lot of different things, but he kind of hosts this space. And in this space, they kind of do like some like art discussions and stuff like that. And kind of like that. Like that was a like an interesting space where somebody was like talking about, you know, like artists, and then they said, yeah, artists, but like we are talking about like rappers, and like they were like, yeah, rappers, but like unlike this rapper, like but as an artist, you're doing this, and I'm like, but a rapper's an artist. Like rap is an art, and I'm like, it's the same thing that we do with poets. It's like a lot of times we're like, yeah, but as artists,
Right.
this is what we do. But I'm like, poetry is without a doubt. There's no proof. Like I'm not stretching the meaning of the word to say that poetry is art. And so creating poetry makes you an artist. And I like we sometimes pull like we're like we have to figure out more things to attach to it in order
Hmm.
to really expand ourselves into being an artist. But I'm like,
Hmm.
no, like if you are an artist, if you are a poet,
Yeah.
then you are creating art.
Yeah. And the one time that where poets get lumped into artists is like concept of like starving artists, and it's like, okay, so we're
Yeah.
gonna accept the negative, but we're not gonna embrace any of the positive. You know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because quite as is kept, perhaps there's there are people um that are not necessarily had turned the corner in making any kind of living attached to their art in eh, pretty much every artistic discipline that you can think of,
Right.
right? So yeah, so it's just to say that like we're attaching it to poets, but I think it's also because like we just the barrier to entry to poetry is you know pen and pencil paper, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, pencil paper, and that's kind of the barrier to entry, and it's a lot less accessible as far like, it's a lot less accessible, or it's a lot more accessible, and so people just they kind of like disregard it in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's just there is there is no way that you'd be able to convince like really anybody that is in the motion of creating poetry that like the thing that they're doing is not like
Right.
solidly artistic.
Yeah. So that's the first thing is trying to just address that need. Um.
Yeah.
So once I was like, hey, like there's not really a conference, and also because like like even like there's smaller cities that have poetry conference. Like Yellow Springs has like a poetry,
Yeah.
like and so it's like to be a city of this size and I have something that's like really dedicated to poetry craft, ingest poetry craft.
Yeah.
I was like, let's try to fill that void. Um,
100%.
so once I had the idea that I wanted to do a conference. We had to put it in place. So one of the things I have the advantage is so we have the space because normally you'd have to figure out the venue, and if you're having a venue you know just for like a weekend, they're going to be charging you like a lot of people are going to be charging like $500 a day, $1,000 a day, or things like that. So, and that's one of the reasons why we even got this space to begin with is like, hey, like I can rent a space for a weekend, or I can use the same price and rent it for a month. Um, let's just get it for the month and do more with it. So I already had the venue, which was helpful.
Yeah.
The next part was putting out a call for facilitators, and one of the things I said to facilitators like, look, this is not a paid opportunity right now. I don't really. I'm running the space. Like I'm going to lose money on this because I also didn't want to do like a low ticket thing. I didn't want to be like hey, $5 to get like $20 to get in. Like I made the decision that if I'm going to charge for something, I'm going to charge for something. So I wanted the conference to be free, and so I told that facilitator like, hey, I'm not charging for this. So if you want to lead a session, great. What can I give you instead? And I decided that, hey, I can give you a chance to practice and convey your expertise on an area of poetry to people because, again, there's so many opportunities to perform, but there's not a lot of opportunities to develop and let alone opportunities to guide other poets in that development. So it's like,
Yeah.
this is a chance for you to create a workshop that potentially you could run multiple times, that you may not already have right now. So, you're creating an asset for yourself. And then in addition to that, just with the access to the equipment I have, is say, hey, we'll record you, and we'll take the recordings. And, they'll be on the platform, and you'll get a copy of it, and I'll get a copy of it. To do as you want. with it. And typically if you're trying to get like, a half hour, 40-minute, hour long, video of yourself in this sort of situation comparatively, I mean, it's going to cost, like,
Yeah.
video's not cheap, so I was like, okay, I can't pay you, but I can do this. And then I can also, promote you on my platform and stuff like that. So yeah, you weren't paid
Yeah.
monetarily, but there's other things that you are getting opportunity wise and production wise that hopefully, if you agree with me, it'll be worth the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool too because it's like it's a kind of a standard that you've held from really the beginning of Diverses, which is like this idea that people. One of the things that's really true, I would say, especially of poets, even more so than I would say like other art forms, is that like the infrastructure with around their art has so little development because they're not dealing with the visual medium like on its without you really pushing it out there, you're not necessarily within the realm of like a visual medium in its inception, right? So like you're a lot of these artists, they haven't thought about headshots, they haven't thought about like kind of video of them. They're only thinking about their poem and their work and getting their work
Right.
out there in whatever way that they can.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so it's just like this idea that if you're a poet, and again, this is also again one of the reasons why I'm like this is really cool for people that are coming to the conference and that are just experiencing the conference. But I also think it's like it's cool and important and within the realm of professional development for the people that are leading the courses, because now it's like now you have this video. Well, how long was the sessions? Like 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
It was a 40-minute
40
session,
minutes.
45 minutes.
So yeah, my perception of time
That's
is
good. They
clearly
went fast.
terrible.
That's
Yeah,
great.
but yeah, it was like 40 minutes of you teaching a course that's like interactive with people. That now like you have the large clip, you have smaller clips, you have kind of a credential in that you can be like I led this for diverses, and like this conference is the only and first purely poetry conference in Columbus. So like you have like this credential that you can add on to it. That now it's like when you're wanting to lead your another course, like hopefully the people that kind of came, that were facilitators, it helped them to kind of iron out other things that they can do with their work.
Yeah.
And how they can talk about their
Yeah.
work and things like that. So it was cool on both those aspects. But yeah, you're giving them assets that they could walk away from. That you know, it, if you had to choose between, like, even I would say like something like if it was like $500 to lead this course, I'm like, okay, well, like, do I want $500 or do I want the video production that if you were to hire somebody as a videographer for this window of time with those edits, with the audio and all that other stuff, you're paying that, if not more. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like you're getting all of these things. You're getting what because you had like a single cam setup, you had audio, like good audio like attachment. So like you had all of these assets or you have like this video asset that is really high quality video, high quality sound that that you now have as a professional to kind of extend yourself and kind of be able to show people that, hey, I know what I'm talking about. I have experiences. I have an experience in kind of leading a session like this, and I can lead more.
I think it's also in terms of getting your name out there. A lot of times for our own work, we're the biggest pushers of our work. People aren't
Yeah.
necessarily talking about our work a lot. But when you do something like this, suddenly you get, for instance, like my platform, The Verses, is talking about you multiple times, and those
Yeah.
posts, can get shared and other people are seeing it, things like that. So when you get other people
Mhm.
talking about you, that's how you really grow. Because if you're the only one that's talking about your work, then it's really hard to ever have that growth in any industry, let alone,
Yeah.
art industry or poetry. And there's also a concept online that you want a lot of, for instance, if you're trying to be foundable, you want a lot of backlinks.
Yeah.
Backlinks are times where you're referenced on other websites beyond your own platforms, you know? So suddenly now all these facilitators, they have their names appearing maybe on websites where they have their poems published, but now they also have in anything that's associated with, the conference and things like that. So it's all about, it's a numbers game. It's all about
Yeah.
how can you appear more places at once, and I think that the conference helps that to occur. Also because like, hey, you get the video, but then I'm also making you graphics. I'm making you regular posts. You're mentioned on the website. People see your bio. Like I'm throwing you at many people over and over again on
Yeah.
a variety of different platforms. Um, so that was also part of the lead up to it too, right? Like so we already have a website, and so we had to make a section for the conference, and so one of the things too is I wanted to make sure in creating the sessions, I didn't want the same five people to just dominate and like take up all the seats in every single conference.
Yeah.
Um, and overall, I was pretty happy with the mix of people. For like, there were people that attended almost every session, but there were also people that came for like this one and then another one later, and like so there was a good mix of participants for every single workshop. Every workshop had a different makeup, which
Yeah.
was nice. And one of the ways that I wanted that I did that was by staggering the launch. That I think was helpful. So it's like, because we had workshops that were getting about 45 minutes long from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And
Mm.
so on one day, we opened up the 10 o'clock workshop. Then on the next day, we opened up the following workshop. Then the next day, we opened up the following workshop. And we did that through that kind of series. And another advantage of that, too, was it made each time I posted about the workshop, there was something new to say, like, hey, now this workshop is up. So I'm not like just saying, hey guys, register for a workshop, register for a workshop, register for the workshop. Like each time I'm posting it, there's something new. Like there's a reason to keep following the page,
Yeah.
because the releases also were happening at different times and you couldn't predict it. Like, okay, so this one workshop might open up, at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, but the next workshop opens up at like 3 p.m. On Wednesday and things like that. So staggering it to hit different people, I thought was pretty helpful.
Yeah. And I think it also kind of gives people kind of like a feeling of that like even though it is a large event, it's like there are these individual things that they're coming to that are
Mm-hmm.
kind of part of like the larger component, which I also think is kind of part of really anything, right? So it's like you're not just like, hey, I want to buy Nike shoes. It's like you might want to buy Nike shoes, but you're like trying to buy the new LeBrons that are coming out. So like they're very specified kind of brand, or kind of like connector, but because they're the specified connector, it's like you're gonna have like maybe somebody's like, yeah, I'm not really into LeBron, so I'm gonna wait for like these ones to come
Right.
out or these ones to come out. And I think that you kind of saw that reflected in the people that were coming, right? So like people were coming and they were specifically they're like looking at their phones. They're like, hey, I want to come to like this,
Mm-hmm.
but there's other things that are happening around them that maybe they become interested in. They're
Right.
like kind of you kind of see that audience kind of growing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was again, it also allows for the people like you can kind of see how the individuals kind of either like brand and reputation kind of like who is pulling in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you can kind of see that kind of up close and up front, which is again, I think it was cool for me because I can kind of see a lot of these poets that I've seen in other spaces and I've experienced, but I can kind of see them like what interaction they have with people that are attracted to their work or
Mm-hmm.
attracted to how they talk about their work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, Speaking of that, and like the people who are leading the facilitators, so that's the next aspect I would say is that I wanted to give again an opportunity for development, not only for people participating, but also the facilitators themselves. And so for the people who are leading the sessions, some of them were experienced and have led sessions before. Some of them had, some of them it was their very first time. So I was happy to kind of have that mix because Diverses is all about that aspect of development, especially uh, in a professional context. And so, again, at your open mic, you don't really get an opportunity to take on a role of leadership necessarily. You can be the host, but even that's a different skill set versus actually teaching, like going in on the art form. And so, and a lot of facilitators, expressed me, it was it was meaningful for them to not only lead the workshop but also prepare for the workshop. That's probably the
Yeah.
most powerful section because you got to take the time to really think about what it is you're going to say, how you're going to say it, planning around it. That's where you really engage in a lot of learning.
Yeah. I can't remember, like we were having a conversation about like people like that talk to themselves. And I mean, there's something like really informative and really important because like a lot of the ideas that you have, like you have like kind of the outskirts of an idea, but so much of the ideas like kind of develop in conversation and in preparation. So you can also see how each of the presenters, maybe this is like their first time ever kind of doing something like that, but in their preparation they had to think about what would the natural question be here that I
Mm-hmm.
would want to answer, or what is the answer that I want to develop the question for.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Which is also kind of like a really sneaky important part of like kind of being a presenter. Like, man, I need to develop questions that get to the answers that I that I
Mm-hmm.
want to arrive at.
Yeah.
So yeah, just like kind of developing these people as speakers and as like thought leaders, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Which is like, yeah, it was also just really important because I mean, there were a lot of them were bringing up really important things that somebody that came to the conference might not have ever thought about with regards to the poetry
Mm-hmm.
or how to develop poetry. And so now like this speaker is going to be, referenced, maybe a couple years down the line they're going to be thinking about this conference. They're going to be thinking about, I was sitting in this course and like this person
Mm-hmm.
was having this conversation, and that's when I first started developing this idea because of that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's meaningful for the participants too, because they can see someone that maybe is just like a step ahead of them, and be like, "Oh, I can do that," you
Yeah.
know. And I think also with a lot of the goals with the verses, I was talking about this with one of the poets, and again, the verse is really about trying to achieve creative and financial independence for poets, and I think the big goal is trying to steer some people away who already have MFAs or already have some experience in academia and nonprofit and showing them that there's an alternative path.
Yeah.
But there's also realization that a lot of people are turning to the MFA and to the traditional paths because of elements of status and affiliation. And if you're going for independence, some of that gets lost, right? Because you
Yeah.
have a professor job, you get a title, and people hear like, oh, you're a professor, right? Or if you win a contest, an award, there is status that comes with that. And the path that I'm telling people to go on removes that,
Yeah.
at least to a degree. And I think there's other ways you can kind of recoup it. But in order to attract those people who are going for the traditional path because of those elements of esteem and prestige, we have to find those elements for diverses. So that's going to be a challenge. Um, but I think that right now is very much kind of like planting the seeds. So again, like these are facilitators who have had varying levels of experience. But if I can develop people and bring them out into the world, on their own terms, in a way that people respect,
Yeah.
you know, well then they can then look at what the verses do and be like, oh, like, the verses help grow this. Maybe they can do the same thing for me. So there is kind of like a selfish, like I need the poets who facilitate to do well. I don't need them to
Yeah.
necessarily do well right now, but I need them to do well in the future. If I want diverses to last in the future as well.
Yeah.
So there is, I am kind of staking some of like diverses' growth on, the events and the programming and the people that we bring in. You know.
Yeah, I mean, and a really cool thing is that and maybe you would expect this from somebody that would sign up to be kind of a course leader, is that a lot of them are already like kind of involved, or they're people that like are interested in involving themselves in the poetry community at large, right?
Yeah.
And kind of like getting out there and putting themselves out there. So it's like, now that we can like you're officially a facilitator of the first poetry conference presented by Geoff Anderson and Diverses, right? Like now that you've already done this, like whatever you do in the future, like hopefully, hopefully they're good things. You
Right.
know what
Yes.
I mean? Like don't like be on the nightly news with handcuffs behind your back, like and I learned this from that person. but but yeah, no, it's just I think it's really cool because like this is kind of like a lot of people's starts and points of reference to um much larger things that they're going to accomplish and kind of be a part of, and hopefully they got things that they needed from this
Yeah.
space
Because you remember people that pushed you forward, you know?
right off
You
a
remember
cliff.
them. Yeah. You remember them. Might be the last one you remember. Yeah, you remember them.
They'll remember
Yeah.
me. I know what you did last
Yeah.
summer.
So those are some things I was considering with the facilitators as well. I would say for number 4, the next thing I was thinking about was the production side. Um, it, I knew that I didn't want to necessarily bring in a videographer. I mean, it would have been good. I think future editions will do it, but I was like, for this first version, I think just kind of like a basic. It was just like a one camera setup, and then I floated around a little bit with my second camera. And because I had the second camera, I was also able to do an impromptu session, which I actually posted on the channel, just talking with Ty about zines. Um,
Yeah.
but just like a basic setup that again recorded it, so that way again after the talks, I could give something to the presenters, and
Yeah.
then also I had something that I could post as well for YouTube. So all the talks will be going up. There's a lot of talks, so like, give me some time, but all the talks will be going up on the channel too. So that way people can reference it and learn from the talks as well. And then it's
Yeah.
also a proof of concept. So in the future, when we do the second iteration of this, we already have the proof. We can show people like, hey, this is what it looked like last time. Not
Yeah.
say it's going to look the same in the future, but that's the nice thing about documentation is it gives you that social proof to say, hey, we already did this, and not only did we already do it, but largely it was a one man show. Like I,
Yeah.
like I put together a
100%.
whole conference. Like what do you want me to do?
Well,
You
and
know,
I think about that too because I think that's like a when we're thinking about show or even like event production, so many times we're not thinking at all about the lasting effect of kind of like what like the images that we're capturing here. So like you know you have like let's take out like naturally I would say like the direct video component of it, and let's just think about like the picture that you preserve when you're able to say like not only did this person lead this group of people in this discussion, but we have like a photo that shows that like
hmm
this thing happened, like that like
hmm
would they say the picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So like that right there is something that like so many times like we're not even as poetry show like poetry and poetry connected kind of event producers, they're not thinking about that part. And so it was cool that all of these spaces had some way to be able to show like, hey, this happened here, and
yeah,
like this is like the video, really good and clear audio, and intentional audio that's happening in this space. And then yeah, like just this idea that everything that happened here is also going to be able to, like you can reference it not just in sharing it and being like, hey, this is me sharing a course, but it's also like if I want to go back and try to remember, like, man, like what did I learn in that course? Like where were we at? Like kind of
right,
what did I get down there? Like even when it comes to like people that were taking notes, it's like now you have this thing that you can reference that you got firsthand, and now you have something else. Or
hmm
now if somebody, people have done this with, like with poems and stuff like that too. But if somebody's like, well, hey, I want my students to know something about this topic or something
right,
like that, there is this archive that you can reference on
yeah,
diverses of this person that is kind of leading this
right.
course.
And I think more and more as if you've been on social media, you're probably seeing like more and more like AI related content and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think the more we have production from the real things that actually happened, I think that also increases the level of trust people have in you
Yeah.
in what you produce. Like this is real. I know that this is real people. I know that this was a real situation that occurred because it's to a small degree right now, and it's only going to increase over time.
Yeah.
People are going to start doubting more and more about the things that they interact with.
There
The,
was this. I was watching it a little bit before I left. There was like this video of like Tupac on Mister Rogers' Neighborhood, and it looked like
it's
it was eerie. I'm like, yeah, this is getting bad.
yeah,
Like we're going in a
yeah.
really wild direction.
Like we're getting away from that uncanny valley where it's like it looks too good and it's almost looks too real,
Yeah.
and like they're learning to what to tone down to make it look more realistic and things like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
And it's only as of the time we're making this video, whenever you're watching this in the future, it's only going to get better and harder to determine that, you
Yeah.
know. So and that's where the value of real events and recording real events and things like that I think is really key. I think
100%.
one of the things I'm thinking about with the verses is I think if I have to choose between in person and the online presence for the verses, I'm probably more on the online. Like I would probably say like 60-40, 65-35. But the in person is still a central component for creating the things that move online. So I think
Yeah.
people want the real human, you know.
100%.
Um, so I guess the very last thing I wanted to touch on was just kind of moving forward. Um, and yeah, I would like there to be another conference. I'd like it to be sometime around the same time next year. Um, I think the next thing I would really want to work on, I want to work on developing the facilitation of the workshops further. I was happy with how things went. I think that there's a lot of opportunities with regard, especially to pedagogy and teaching strategy. And I'm biased. Look, I've been teaching since 2010. The teaching I do is English as a second language. In English as a second language, there's like the SIOP model. Like the thing is that when you teach English as a second language, you're taught like teaching techniques. Like you are taught like what are like the most current and most studied teaching techniques that are effective. And a lot of people who are teachers or go through instruction aren't necessarily taught those strategies because the reality is that when you teach a language as a second language, it's really not that special. It's just good teaching. Like all the things you can take from teaching English second language, you can apply to any other field. It's just good teaching. Like it's
Yeah.
scaffolding. It's providing models. It's lowering the effective filter so people take in information better and
Yeah.
things like that. It's watching out for like face, like saving face, like not entering into power dynamic and like arguments with students, to make things everyone
Yeah.
conducive to learning. But the problem is that a lot of people haven't learned those things. Like there's a lot of people teaching
Yeah.
poetry that have not actually ever studied teaching before. So
Yeah.
so it's not fair to expect people who've never gone through years of studying pedagogy, or leading a classroom or leading a workshop to really understand how teaching actually works, you
Yeah.
know. And I knew that going into it. So one of the things I did was I had 2 training sessions online with facilitators just to kind of talk about basics of like, let's try to limit things like teacher talk time versus student talk time. Let's try to make sure we're switching up activities on a regular basis. Adults aren't kids, so you can have activities that lean longer, but that doesn't mean you can't just have an activity that drags forever. And
Yeah.
so, and one of the things I saw was that I think moving forward for like the second iteration, I want to train the facilitators a lot more
Okay.
because I thought the sessions were fine. People were taking notes. People got information from it. People seemed happy. The response overwhelmingly positive. So then the next step is then even just making it even more positive. How
Yeah.
can we even make sure that we're engaging? Because one of the things I saw a lot, there was a lot of teacher talk. Um, there wasn't a whole lot of mixing up of activities that I would like to see more of, to engage people in different intelligence models as well. It's like it was a lot of there's a lot of like speech based. Like I talk, you listen, and then maybe ask you a question and we talk about it. So like, but there was no other ways to like kind of check comprehension to see like, oh, like through this activity, through this visual or through this like body movement or something like that. Like, how are we checking comprehension to make sure people are actually with us?
Yeah.
Um, so I want to incorporate a few more modalities into the instruction. Um, what one of the things I really liked was I told facilitators like, hey, no PowerPoint. I'm not doing it. I'm not bringing in a projector. I said no PowerPoint. I'll have a little whiteboard, and you can bring in, handouts and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people don't know how to use PowerPoint. So that's one of the reasons I was very adamant about it, because
Yeah.
one of the things we need to understand about PowerPoint was created by engineers who don't know how to present information. So they created PowerPoint to to convey information, and it's ideally with PowerPoint you really don't want any text. Like you
Yeah.
want your slides are supposed to be pictures. You know, 3 to 5 words a slide max. Because otherwise people are just reading it and like this could have been an email. You know,
Yeah.
and so I'm so happy the facilitators were willing to work with me on that to limit the technology aspect and to really kind of keep it, hands on in the approach. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think moving forward, that's probably the next big step I would like to take would be mixing up the facilitation a little bit more.
Yeah. I think and I also think that something that is good about what Diverse is and really what the conference was as well is that if you are an incredibly experienced kind of like poet, if you've been either studying or doing poetry for a really long time, and maybe you've encountered things like I don't know, like courses in poetry, slam, and all that other stuff, then like a lot of the information that can be presented in this kind of context maybe is not like at your level as far as like, okay, like what I need to kind of get in this space. But a lot of what the presenters are doing and what a lot of some of the audience is people that haven't necessarily encountered a lot of that kind of stuff, which is also really cool because it's like, a lot of people are poets that are from, either just before or really a lot of them like during like the pandemic, right? So
Yeah.
it's like a lot of them, a lot of those ways of kind of communing and being together as poets and learning and developing are things that were not as readily available during
Right.
that window of time and have not made their full resurgence, like even now. So a lot of them were able to be like presenters in a space where they were kind of maybe they were just above the kind of the space and level of a lot of the people that were like coming, right? And so even their style of instruction is, it's still like that's still at its like kind of beginner level. Like they're still there where they're like, I'm learning how to put together kind of together materials. And so having somebody like you that is incredibly developed in both instruction as well as in poetry, I think kind of adds like another layer to the conference that is more than just what is happening here. It's also like now you're developing people that are able to now talk about poetry a lot clearer than maybe they did before. And I also think that, in a way, PowerPoint is it, in that context is a little bit of a crutch, right? Because now you
100%.
have this instrument that you kind of going through. I think that like there's like some of the instructors like when it comes to like maybe they're a little bit too dependent on kind of like referencing their phone and kind of being like
Oh. Mhm.
to a degree, but it's like that's also a learning curve. I think that's
Yeah.
also something that's just like as you get more comfortable and confident as an instructor. And really, it's also about reps. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you could teach something 5 times in a row, and then the sixth time you realize like I'm not even looking at the book
Right.
anymore. Like I'm just talking, and
Yeah.
people are like, so it's like maybe it's about reps
Yeah.
too. But yeah, like you're developing these instructors. And then I don't know how then necessarily you'd want to do it next time, but I think it would be cool if even some of the same instructors, like not all of them,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not necessarily all of them, but like
Mm-hmm.
maybe if some of the same instructors were to come back and like now they have this second round of instruction from you,
Mm-hmm.
where they're like, oh, I'm learning a little bit more, and hopefully, and this is shout out to all the instructors. Hopefully, they're in between that time they're developing as well. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
hopefully like they're seeking out other, and also I think there's like a thing that Diversus does really well. And then I'm hoping I naturally hope for this for the conference is that it develops an appetite for like this kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
now you can seek things out yourself that you didn't really think about seeking out before.
Facts.
But now Diversus kind of created that appetite, and now you're like, well, how can I teach this? And so much of this stuff is like there's like you search that question into YouTube, it's there,
Mhm.
right? So you can kind of develop your tools and sharpen your tools, and then next conference you're a grade above, and you're doing other things. So yeah,
So those are just 5 quick thoughts and takeaways that I had from the Poet Assembly. To those who participated or expressed interest in it, thank you. To those who aren't aware of it, well, now you are, and can keep an eye out for it next year. And
yeah, I don't think we clapped it up. We got to clap it up. Clap it up for Geoff. Really, I think okay, and I don't want to dwell on this too long, but I also think this is like also really important. Like a lot of times as poets, the hardest thing is like decision fatigue. It's like, okay, do I even want to get something started? How if I don't know how to get something started, or I have an idea that I can't really like push the ball forward right here right now, it just never gets done. And so one of the coolest things kind of like watching you kind of develop Diverses and develop podcast, like all the podcasts that are involved with it, all of the materials that are involved with it, the courses or anything like that, is like it's not really decision fatigue. It's just like if I can think of it, then it's gonna happen. You know what I mean? Like how it's gonna happen, what it's gonna look like, and things like that. Those are things that we can develop, but it's gonna happen. So like kind of seeing the poetry conference go from just a comment and you're just like thinking of it to now it's like it's a thing that did happen.
yeah.
It happened, and it's gonna happen again, and it's gonna kind of grow and
Yeah.
develop. And I think if more artists and more poets in specific had that attitude towards their own projects and their own thing that they're bringing into reality, I just think that like yeah, we could really get rid of this thought that oh there's really nothing to like poetry is not art, like poetry is just this separate thing that you have to grow and develop to be like no, there's an infrastructure and there's a thought design behind being a poet,
Yeah.
which is I am a poet and I'm a maker of things, and those things can support
Yeah.
my livelihood.
There's actually a flyer I'm posting later today. This one's this one says that um, if I can't do it for a decade, I don't do it for a day. So it's
Nice.
like attaching to the things that you could see yourself doing long term. And if you can't see yourself doing it long term, then maybe it's not worth doing.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, I think that really speaks to it. And again, like it was just me organizing it. I mean, the facilitators led it, but I had to, put the call for facilitators, organize the space, the production and stuff like that. Um, and yeah, I mean, you can certainly do this with a team. In fact, I would encourage you to do a team. Don't be like me, but it's hard to don't do
Don't
that.
be like
No, because it would be better with a team. But at the same time, I think people also need to understand what's possible if you are on your own.
yeah,
You can organize a conference on your own. You could.
100%.
All right, with that, guys, thank you so much for watching us. We'll be back next week with another edition of Arts and Offers. Once more, my name is Geoff.
I'm Matthias.
Thank you guys for your time. We'll see you later. Have a good day, have a good night, and a good afternoon.